The message lit up my phone screen at 8:30, same as the night before. And the night before that. Late meeting, again. Don't wait up. I stared at those words, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. 6 months ago, I would have typed back a quick, okay, with a heart emoji. Maybe added, miss you, if I was feeling particularly affectionate. But tonight, I just set my phone down without responding. Something wasn't right. I could feel it in my gut. These late meetings had been happening more and more often over the past 3 months. At first, it was once every few weeks. Tom would come home smelling of coffee and exhaustion, loosening his tie as he'd slump onto the couch beside me. He'd tell me about difficult clients, impossible deadlines, the pressure from upper management. I believed him then. Why wouldn't I? We'd been married for 8 years. He'd never given me a reason not to trust him. But then once every few weeks became once a week, then twice. And now 3 nights in a row, my husband wasn't coming home until well after midnight. I'd tried to be understanding. His company had recently taken on a major new client. Everyone was pulling extra hours. At least, that's what he told me. But there were other things, small inconsistencies that on their own meant nothing, but together formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. His dress shirts came back from the dry cleaners, but I couldn't remember him dropping them off. There was a receipt for a restaurant I'd never heard of, one that was nowhere near his office. He'd started showering as soon as he got home, no matter how late it was, and last week, when I called his office phone during one of these late meetings, his assistant told me he'd left at 6. I picked up my phone again and opened our text thread. Scrolling back through the messages, I noticed they were always the same. Late meeting, working late, don't wait up. Always sent around the same time, always vague. I set my phone down and took a deep breath. Tonight, I needed to know the truth. I glanced at the clock. It was almost 9, which meant Tom had been working for nearly 2 hours already. Plenty of time for me to get ready. I changed out of my pajamas and into dark jeans and a black sweater, pulling my hair back into a ponytail. I grabbed my car keys, pausing only to check that I had enough gas for what might be a long night. As I backed out of our driveway, I felt strangely calm. Part of me thought I was being ridiculous, that I'd follow Tom to his office and find him hunched over his desk surrounded by paperwork. But a deeper part knew better. I knew where his office was, a sleek high-rise downtown. Tom had insisted I park in the reserved parking when I visited, said the surrounding streets weren't safe after dark, so that's where I went first. I pulled into the visitors section of the parking garage, my headlights off. From here I could see most of the executive lot where Tom always parked. His silver Audi wasn't there. I wasn't surprised, not really, but seeing that empty parking spot made my stomach tighten. I sat in my car, thinking, if he wasn't at the office, where would he be? The restaurant from the receipt came to mind, La Maison on 9th Street. It was worth a try. The restaurant was upscale, the kind of place with valet parking and no prices on the menu. I drove past slowly, scanning the windows. Nothing, no sign of Tom. I was about to give up when my phone buzzed, a notification from our joint credit card account, $148.50 at La Maison. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. He was here, right now, spending a fortune on dinner during a late meeting. I found a parking spot half a block away and walked back to the restaurant. Through the window, I could see couples dining by candlelight, servers in crisp black and white uniforms. I didn't want to go inside, didn't want to make a scene. Instead, I positioned myself across the street, partially hidden by a row of potted plants outside a closed boutique. And then I saw him. Tom was sitting at a corner table, his back to the window. I couldn't see his face, but I'd know the set of his shoulders anywhere. He was leaning forward, his hand extended across the table, touching the hand of someone else. A woman, young, maybe early 30s, with long dark hair cascading over her shoulders. She was laughing at something he said, her head thrown back, her other hand toying with the stem of her wine glass. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. All the air left my lungs at once, and I had to steady myself against the building. I wanted to storm in there, to flip their table, to scream and cry and demand answers. But some small, rational part of my brain held me back. Not here, not now. I needed more information before I confronted him. So I waited. For nearly an hour, I watched them through the window. They talked, they laughed, they touched, Tom looked happier than I'd seen him in years, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled, the way they used to with me. Finally, they asked for the check. I ducked behind a parked car as they exited the restaurant, Tom's hand resting on the small of her back. They walked to his car, my husband opening the passenger door for her, the way he used to do for me. I followed them from a distance, careful to stay several cars behind. They drove for about 20 minutes, eventually pulling into the parking lot of an apartment complex I'd never seen before. It wasn't particularly fancy, but it wasn't cheap either. I watched as they got out of the car, as Tom took her hand and walked with her to the entrance. I watched as she unlocked the door, as they disappeared inside. I sat in my car for another hour, numb and cold despite the mild evening. At some point, a light came on in a second-floor window. I could see their silhouettes moving behind the curtain. And then the light went out. He wasn't coming home tonight. There was no late meeting. There was just this woman, this apartment, this betrayal. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Did he love her? Was he planning to leave me? And most pressingly, what was I going to do about it? By the time I pulled into our driveway, it was after midnight. Our house, the one we bought together, decorated together, filled with 8 years of memories, felt like a stranger's home. I walked from room to room, seeing everything with new eyes. The wedding photos on the mantel, the blanket we brought back from our honeymoon in Peru, the dent in the wall from when Tom had tried to move the bookshelf by himself. I ended up in our home office, sitting at the desk we shared. Tom's laptop was there, password protected of course, but I knew where he kept his important documents. In the bottom drawer, behind a folder of tax returns, was a small safe. I knew the combination, our wedding date. Inside were our passports, some cash, and a USB drive Tom used for backup files. I plugged it into my laptop, my hands trembling slightly. Most of the files were mundane, old work presentations, vacation photos, scanned copies of important documents. But there was also a folder labeled Personal. Inside was a spreadsheet titled Budget. I opened it, expecting to find our household expenses. Instead, I found a detailed record of money Tom had been moving to a separate account, an account I knew nothing about. Small amounts at first, 100 here, 200 there, but over the past year, the transfers had gotten larger. 500, 1,000, 5,000. The most recent entry was from 3 days ago, $20,000. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll through the rest of the files. There were photos of the woman from the restaurant, photos of them together, screenshots of text messages and emails. This wasn't just an affair, this was a life he had been building, separate from me, funded with our money, money I had helped earn. I slammed the laptop shut and went to the kitchen. I opened a bottle of wine with trembling hands and poured myself a glass, trying to think, to plan. I considered calling my sister, my best friend, anyone who might help me make sense of this. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud, to make this betrayal real by sharing it. Instead, I sat at our kitchen island until dawn broke, the half-empty wine bottle beside me, plotting my next move. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I showered, dressed in my best work outfit, a navy blue suit that always made me feel powerful, and made coffee. I was halfway through my second cup when my phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Early client breakfast. See you tonight. I didn't respond. Instead, I gathered the evidence I'd found, made copies, and stored them in multiple locations. I called in sick to work. Then I made 3 important calls. The first was to our bank, where I moved half of our joint savings into an account in my name only. The second was to a divorce attorney, whose name I'd gotten from a colleague months ago, just in case, I'd told myself then, never really believing I'd need it. The third was to a locksmith. By the time I'd finished my calls, it was nearly noon. I spent the next few hours packing essentials, clothes, personal documents, a few mementos I couldn't bear to leave behind. The locksmith came and went, leaving me with new keys and a sense of grim satisfaction. At 6 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. Heading home. Want me to pick up dinner? This time, I responded, no need. I've got everything covered. And I did. By the time Tom's key turned in the lock, the old lock, the one that no longer worked, I was sitting at the kitchen table, calm and ready. "Hello?" he called, confusion in his voice as his key failed to open the door. "Babe, the door's not working." I walked to the front door, looked through the peephole at my husband of 8 years, the man who had been sleeping with another woman, the man who had been stealing our money, the man who had broken every promise he'd ever made to me. "The locks have been changed," I said through the door, my voice steady. "What?" He sounded genuinely confused. "Why? Let me in. We need to talk about this." "We do need to talk," I agreed. "But not tonight. Tonight you should go back to that apartment on Willow Street, the one you've been paying for with our money." Silence. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't lie to me anymore, Tom. I know everything. About her, about the money you've been moving, about all of it." More silence. I could almost hear him thinking, calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew, how I knew it, what his next move should be. "Look," he finally said, his voice low and urgent. "This isn't what you think. Let me in and I'll explain everything." I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "I think it's exactly what I think. But don't worry, you'll get your chance to explain, to a judge. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be hearing from them tomorrow." "You've talked to a lawyer?" His voice rose, anger replacing the confusion. "Are you serious? After everything I've done for you?" "Rather, everything you've done to me," I corrected him. "The affairs, the lies, the money. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I was that stupid?" "It's not like that," he insisted, but his voice had changed. There was panic there now. "You're making a mistake. A huge mistake." "No, Tom, the mistake was mine. 8 years ago, when I thought you were someone I could trust." I took a deep breath. "Your things will be packed and ready for you to pick up this weekend. My lawyer will contact you about the details." "You can't do this," he said, his voice hard now. "This is my house, too. You can't just lock me out." "Actually, I can. At least temporarily. Check your email when you get a chance. I've sent you some interesting reading material, copies of your little budget spreadsheet, screenshots of your text messages, photos of you and your girlfriend, the same copies I sent to my lawyer this morning." He was silent again, but I could hear his breathing, fast and shallow. "Oh, and one more thing," I added, feeling a strange calm wash over me. "I've already contacted the police about the money you've been moving. Turns out, when you take money from a joint account and hide it from your spouse, it can be considered financial fraud, especially when it's as much as $20,000. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "I already have," I replied. "Now, if you don't leave immediately, I'll add trespassing to the list. Your choice." I heard him curse, heard his fist hit the door once in frustration. Then footsteps, retreating down the front walk, the sound of his car starting, and then silence. I slid down against the door until I was sitting on the floor, my knees pulled up to my chest. I had done it. After a night and day of hell, I had faced him. I had taken back control. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. There would be lawyers and negotiations, tears and recriminations. There would be friends taking sides and family asking questions. There would be the painful process of untangling 8 years of shared life. But tonight, in this moment, I had won. Not just against Tom, but against the voice inside that had whispered I wasn't enough, that I deserved to be deceived, that I should accept whatever scraps of affection he was willing to throw my way. I got up from the floor, walked back to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of the expensive scotch Tom had been saving for a special occasion. This seemed special enough. I took a sip, the liquid burning my throat, warming me from the inside out. Through the window, I could see the night sky, stars twinkling above the city lights, the same stars that had been there yesterday, when I thought my marriage was just going through a rough patch, the same stars that would be there tomorrow, when I began the process of rebuilding my life. I raised my glass in a silent toast to myself, to the woman who had been brave enough to follow her husband one night, who had spent the morning deciding how to ruin him, and who had found the strength to start over instead.